Good morning, everybody. Happy Halloween week. Welcome to the October 26th special session of the Bellingham City Council budget session on our 2021-2022 biennial budget. The meetings are being chaired by Finance Chair, Councilmember Pinky Vargas.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much, Jean. So today is the fourth in our budget session meetings of 6 that are scheduled. Today we will be covering finance, human resources, legal, and information technology. So I am first going to turn it over to our Mayor, Seth Fleetwood, for a few comments.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Vargas. I just wanted to introduce the items today that you're going to be going over with the budget work. And of course, today's presenters form the internal services group for the city of Bellingham. And I just want to make a couple of comments about this particular group. This is the internal facing group of providers of essential public services in Bellingham. They're not the ones that the public at large always sees, but I want to just emphasize their importance. Of course, we're talking about finance and HR and legal and IT. We were very deliberate in prioritizing them during our budget work and preparations, because frankly, we learned a lot of lessons from the Great Recession and recognize how vitally important they are. They really do serve as the backbone of city operations, and they keep us running, they keep us moving. They've been the foundation of so much of the important work we've done this year in our COVID response. So they're vital. We can't be successful without them functioning well, and so that's going to be reflected in the budget and the presentations that you see this morning. Without them, we would truly be dead in the water. And I just wanted to underscore that before we started. So back to you, Councilmember Vargas.
Thank you, Mayor Fleetwood. Okay, so our first budget session today is going to be on finance, and finance is on page 81 of your budget booklet. And I'm going to turn it over to our finance director, Andy Asberson.
Thank you, Councilmember Vargas. We're actually going to start with a presentation by Forrest Longman, our Deputy Finance Director, to go over the central services and ICAP calculations to give an overview of how these departments are funded. So I'm going to pass it over to Forrest.
Thank you, and I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully you're all looking at a PowerPoint presentation at this point. So we thought it'd be useful to go over just briefly here our internal service charges for the city. It represents a fair amount of activity. You can see the list on the right hand side there is all our various internal service charges, and I'm gonna run through those here. Oops. So the internal service charges in the city are a series of charges that are intended to recover the costs incurred for centralized services from the funds that benefit. So for example, the finance department, the whole city benefits from the finance department, and we try to allocate what the finance department costs to all the various departments that benefit. It also ensures that each department's budget shows the full cost of operations. The clearest rationale for this is our operations that run as a business, like our utilities. It's important to know all the costs associated with that, like how much it costs for the financial and auditing support that they receive, the IT support that they receive. We want to make sure that those costs are recognized in that business so that the rates that are charged can capture those costs. Overall, this represents about $37 million of our annual budget, these internal service charges. So it's a pretty big piece. Our 2021 citywide proposed budget is $188 million. And this is $37 million of that is kind of just moving money from one fund to another to recognize true costs. So most of these are allocated out using factors that costs that have already been incurred. So we're actually charging each department for the costs that it incurred last year or the year before in most cases. The other important thing about internal service charges, it ensures that the city's assets are maintained and replaced on a regular and consistent basis across the city functions. So an individual department might have a desire to save money in one place or another to do something else with it, and they might delay replacing a vehicle or a computer. And in the distant past, that often led to problems where there were departments that had lots of computers that were security risks because they were too old, or vehicles that were costing a lot to maintain. And we determined that if we centralized some of that replacement stuff, we could keep it consistent and we could ensure that we're getting the most out of our assets and replacing them when they need to be replaced. So the biggest piece, well, not the biggest piece necessarily, but the most notable that is the ICAP program. So that's the Indirect Cost Allocation Program. And that is how we pay for finance, human resources, IT, legal, and also the executive and legislative functions. So those are all general fund functions. And so this is how we allocate out those costs to all the other funds. And in 2021, it's $5.3 million. We actually changed it this year due to some auditor concerns. So you can see on that table how we used to allocate them and what our new allocation factors are. I'm not going to go through all those, but just to give you a sense that it's based on, try to be a nexus of how it relates to the service that they're receiving. And all departments pay into this, even general fund departments, although we don't physically charge it because that money is within the general fund, but they are allocated a portion of it. Then moving on to the technology allocations, beyond IT being part of ICAP, it also has a number of individual funds that operate. The main one is the Computer Infrastructure Replacement Fund, or the SIRF Fund is what we call that. And that basically, that's how we replace all the computers in the city. So they're all on a timeline and they get replaced after a certain amount of time so that they stay in peak operating condition. And so especially with computers, we don't run into software and security problems. In 2021, we changed this allocation to include more maintenance costs for the city. So now it's not just replacing computers, but it's also paying for the programs, many of the citywide programs that run on those computers. That used to be recovered through ICAP, and we reduced ICAP proportionally. The second is the technology replacement, and this funds major technology projects citywide. And so that's things like the finance enterprise, new software for the entire city would be paid through this fund. And that's charged out based on the allocation factor you see on the screen. And finally, telecom, which is the phones, and that's recovering those costs plus overhead and just based on how many phones are used. And actually, for this one, we had a bit of a fund balance, so we were able to do a bit of a rate holiday for 2021 to address some of our budget needs. Next, we're moving on to a fund that the legal department's in charge of, and that's the Claims and Litigation Fund. And this is really a self-insurance program for the city. It pays for damages and claims against the city, and also the city's insurance costs. We do have stop loss insurance for property and damages over a certain amount, but it's a sort of a complicated allocation factor. It's about $1.5 million. And this year we actually had to increase this one. As you are aware, we had a budget action earlier this year to appropriate some more money in this fund. Council established we need to have a $5 million target in the fund balance for this. And so we are below that now, and we will be working back up to establishing that. So we did have to raise rates for this charge this year for 2021. Next, we're moving into Public Works, which handles facilities, fleet, purchasing, warehouse, and the mailroom. The two big parts of this are facilities and fleet. Facilities handles all the maintenance and custodial for the city, plus the overhead associated with that. And that's about $5 million. And we base that generally on the facility square footage and also how much maintenance has been needed in previous years. Again, it's that cost recovery. It's costs that have already been incurred. And then the other big piece is fleet, which is $4.6 million. This one, we recently changed. So previously we would just take how long we expected a vehicle to last, and we would charge a replacement charge for a certain number of years. And we would also have an estimated repair cost. This year, we're transitioning this into a rental model where the department pays a flat rate depending on what category of car that they use. And that's how we recover the costs that are incurred in this fund. And it allows the city centrally to control the fleet a little better and to ensure that vehicles are only being replaced when they need to be replaced. And in some cases, maybe a vehicle will be too worn out for a high volume usage in one department, but may still be able to be shifted to a different department for a more low volume usage. So it increases our flexibility. And for the first time, we have all of the city vehicles into this fleet replacement, this vehicle rental program, including all of the apparatus in the fire department. So that's a big thing for us. We've been working towards that for years, and it should allow us to be able to maintain all those things on a much more reliable basis. There's 3 more minor: purchasing, warehouse, and mailroom. I'm not going to get into those too much, but those are services that everybody uses and are charged out based on how they use them. And then finally, the big one here is the employee benefits. And this is a little different than the others. This money comes in, all the salaries or the benefits charges you see in the budget, for the most part, are charged out and into this internal service fund. From there, we pay the insurance charges. So this is moving money from the various city funds into that internal service charge. And it's just based on the employee, workers' comp and unemployment at work, based on the compensation. And yeah, it's just a big portion of the money, and that's how those processes move through the city. So just wanted to highlight that because it's a relatively large part of what the city does and pays for. Not the most exciting, I know, but given we were talking about our internal service departments today, we thought that would be useful information to know. So that's it for me. And I'll hand it over to Andy.
All right, thank you, Forrest. So yeah, important to note is that we're going over a lot of our internal services today with finance, legal, HR, and IT. Internal service funds are those that start at the 500 level. So anything that starts with a 5, that's the internal service funds. And then ICAP is what the general fund uses for its rates to be able to fund our internal service funds of the general fund. So I hope that's helpful information. I don't want to overcomplicate it, but it is such a major portion of what we do here at the city and how we fund things. So we thought it was important to go over just a quick overview, and be happy to answer any questions later on if anybody has any as well. Can everybody see my updated screen here? Okay, excellent. All right, so I'm going to get into the finance department budget presentation. So we're looking at the 2019-2020 department achievements. So 2 unique items that for the 2019-2020 biennium are the top 2 bullets right there. First off is the finance enterprise system. So this was a massive undertaking for the city. Many years of work for IT, finance, public works, and others. This contract was actually being signed approximately 4 years ago when I started with the city. We've been working towards going live on this software the whole time. But with that, I mean, this is a major system consolidation. This is replacing Kayenta, which is our general ledger software system. We had an old asset management system that this replaces, a computer asset tracking system, contract routing, eCity, which is our warehouse central stores. That's what Forrest touched on, it's kind of like our internal store that we can purchase things out of, used a lot by Public Works, but used by all departments as well. This system also enables the city to go more paperless and also interfaces with a document management system so that we can have paperless records management. So all of these things are major steps. I know Marty, I think, is going to expand out on some of what finance enterprise entails, but that just touches on a few things. You can see that we've done this in 2 phases. Phase 1 here was the warehouse, and so that's that internal store for everyone. That went live on March 23rd, 2020. And looking back, I was actually surprised to see that is actually the day that Governor Inslee announced our Stay Home, Stay Healthy order was on March 23rd. And so that's also the day that we went live on the warehouse. And then all the other systems, we went live on June 1st, 2020. So not only was this a complex, very difficult project, but also with the pandemic, with everything else going on, with the ability for IT and really Marty's team to get us all teleworking and moving forward. It's amazing that we were able to hit these targets and move forward. And it took a long time. It was a complex project, but it had to be done right. So I know there's a lot of years involved, but there's so much other aspects involved in this project that really ensured that we were going to have it done right on June 1st. And so that the team really did an amazing job of getting us up and running with everything they had to tackle and everything, all the changes on the vendor side, and just to make sure that we had a great system moving forward. It's not perfect. We always have more things to work on. There's more exceptions, but it is excellent that we hit those targets, and it's a great system that we're moving forward with. So that was a big achievement for 2020. Another item that's unique to the biennium was refunding approximately $56 million in principal of the water and sewer bonds. This provided net present value savings of almost $13 million and annual average savings of $735,000 in the water and sewer funds. So this is really possible through our excellent bond rating. We're at a AA2. It really shows the strong management and financial oversight that the city has held to ensure that the financial condition of these utility funds are strong, and really the investment in infrastructure and the strong considerations of replacement and just the ongoing health of our infrastructure within the water sewer department is excellent. So really kudos to the Public Works Department and keeping everything in line and focused towards the future. There was a consideration of our bond rating increasing, but with the unknown within the pandemic and also the unknown of the future sewer project that held us back just a little bit, but there was a very strong consideration of bumping us up to a AA1. So that also gets us excellent rates within the market. So it was great to go through that process. Third bullet, we have our annual audit of the financial statements. That's our CAFR audit, our comprehensive annual financial report, also accountability and federal audit. We've been able to complete that audit very successfully. We're going for our 19th CAFR this year. We've submitted that off to GFOA to be reviewed to evaluate that process. The last one there we haven't really talked about, that's an IT conversion audit. So with the conversion of finance enterprise for our general ledger, the state auditor's office came in and their performance audit team did an IT conversion audit to ensure that our data from our Kayenta old softwares and our AMSI software, our old asset management software, all of the data from the past got converted properly and there was adequate controls and of that process. And so we had we just heard back actually over just the last couple of weeks that we had a successful IT conversion audit. So it's excellent to see. And again, amazing job for the team to be able to tackle all of that data and come across and translate it over into the new system. And so that was a great positive to see on the IT conversion audit. Last bullet is just continue to effectively provide financial services for ongoing day-to-day operations, including billing, receiving, business tax services, records management, accounting, reporting, and budget tracking. So being that we were in a pandemic and come late March, our entire department many of them got moved out. We've been operating with a bit of a skeleton crew within City Hall. There's we consider finance an essential service to the city. We still have the armored car showing up daily. We still have the mail coming in and being routed. So we did keep a small portion of our department within City Hall. But then again, Marty and her team getting us able to telecommute and giving us able to do all of these things on a day-to-day basis. We didn't miss any billings or any of these items that we do day to day. So it was great to continue to effectively do that through the pandemic. Looking into 21-22 proposed budget, not a lot changing. We do have one frozen position of an office assistant 2. Our FTEs are remaining approximately the same, just with that one frozen item. Charges for goods and services, that's really going to be changes within that ICAP. And so that's what funds us as well as HR, legal, IT. So that charge for goods and services, that's really that internal ICAP charges. And so you see there's some adjustment there with some movement of the ICAP. Also in here, if you're following along on page 81 and into 82, you'll see that we within the finance department have all the debt service funds. And so a lot of this stuff down here, these items down here are the payment of the general governmental debt. And so we administrate that. And so a lot of this stuff is just transfers and debt payments going back and forth. So the actual operations of the finance department is pretty small within the revenues and within kind of these top 3 lines within the expenses. So other items, we had line item reductions for the budget to align with actual expenses. So we looked to reduce our budget anywhere we could within line items if we weren't using our supplies or if our travel was too high, any place that we could kind of reduce some expenses here and there to reduce our individual line items. We also made small adjustments to our payroll allocations. So with that, an example is our revenue coordinator who oversees all the revenue coordination of the city, but there's a big majority of that time is used within the utility funds. And so there's some small adjustments to the allocation of how much that position's time is charged directly to the utilities. And then we also are removing a term limit position, a business analyst position. So we've had 2 dedicated individuals within the finance department on the finance enterprise conversion process. This business analyst has been key in ensuring that we can move forward. This is a key to our ability to operate our workflow and our ability to get electronic approvals and just the behind the scenes of the actual project. So we're removing that term limit. We really want to keep this person on this project. He's doing an amazing job on this project. So we're going to remove that term limit on this one. The 21-22 work plan is to continue to provide quality services to city residents and also city departments. I forgot to mention earlier that we have approximately 27,000 utility customers. We have about 14,000 active B&O tax filers, and about 8,600 of those are within the city. And we also have approximately 1,600 parking customers. So we want to continue to provide quality services externally and also internally. We do want to continue to smooth out business processes within finance enterprise. Whenever you go live within a system, you can cover 95% of what the standard process is, but there's always exceptions to the rules of unusual accounts receivable or unusual payment or some unusual discount. Or there's some other things that we're still working through finance enterprise, but that's just an ongoing commitment to make that a better process. Here we want to expand our internal and external reporting. With finance enterprise, we've been able to bring on another reporting system called Cognos that can expand our ability to report internally, create additional dashboards. We're also evaluating the way we can have an outward facing dashboard of some sort. So I know there's been a desire to have something like OpenGov or something where you can go to the website and kind of filter through some expenses or revenues and evaluate what you're seeing within the city finances. And so that is a goal of ours, is that we want to work towards that. We still have some things to work out with Finance Enterprise, but our ultimate goal is to have an external facing dashboard where you can go in and filter and search and look around the finances. So it's something we want to work towards in this next biennium. We're also going to work with Public Works and IT to implement a monthly billing, utility billing. This will be a big project. We plan on working on it all through 21 to hopefully go live into 22 sometime. We also are looking to update our financial policies. Our last full review of our financial policies was back in 2010, is when we had that official full overview. There's a lot of information within our full financial policies. It's an investment policy, budget policy. There's other aspects of the policy that get updated within each of the budget updates, like our financial principles and targets, such as the 15%. Within the general fund. So this is something we want to evaluate. Forrest and I want to dig into these policies and bring them back to council to really go over the full financial policies and keep them current. The last item here is evaluate other system improvements. So along with Finance Enterprise, we want to smooth that out, but then be open to other improvements we can make, whether that's within our utilities or within B&O or other systems that may need to be updated. Maybe not this year, but we got a plan to the future over this next biennium to determine what's the best way to provide services internally and also externally to our customers, all the citizens of the city, to ensure that we're providing a good, usable system. If you're coming to pay bills, we want to make that as easy as possible for people. So those are the highlights of what I have. And happy to answer any questions you might have.
Council members, you can put up your physical hands if you want to. Councilmember Hamill.
Thanks for the presentation this morning. It was pretty comprehensive. I have a couple of questions. One, I don't know, I'll just do one at a time, but do you see any threats to our municipal bond rating score?
Not at this time. We consistently meet with our financial advisor and our legal counsel, our bond counsel, to evaluate what might be out there, what might be concerning. So we also continue to just evaluate our financial condition and our position. And so again, we don't see anything at this point that would adjust. Our consideration was actually whether we'd adjust up, and that was our hope. So we were actually hoping to get a better bond rating. And we hope we can keep on going that direction.
Council members? Councilmember Hamill, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Knutson.
Real brief, Andy, our reserves, they looking okay. I know they're not going to be as great as we thought, but we okay with our reserves?
Yeah, we started in a strong position. You know, we are in an unknown time right here. It is, there's no good way to forecast what we're seeing. We just got some new sales tax information. We get some, we're working through the September report. We hope to be able to give you an updated finance report probably on Wednesday afternoon after we have time to go through the details a little more. It's such an unusual circumstance. When we even see sales tax might be higher than we expected, we're concerned maybe that B&O tax might be lower because we're not seeing the local businesses maybe that being impacted more than how the sales tax is coming in, when it's strong on construction, strong on motor vehicles, home sales, and maybe in those online retailers. You know, it may be still hurting locally, and so we're trying to evaluate all those numbers. Very, very hard time to forecast, and we're doing the best we can to give you updated, accurate information. And it's a challenging time to try to figure that out. So we'll continue to try to bring updated information. We really want to make some intervals of time where we can continue to bring you updates of what we're looking at from revenue and how the expenses are doing. So that's ultimately with the finance enterprise, we smooth things out too. It gives us the ability to update our reports more timely and get the information out to all of you more timely, so we can have just more discussion and give you our thoughts on what we're thinking on what it's looking like.
Thank you, sir.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Council members, Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Councilmember Vargas. So I actually have a very general question that I don't know if Andy, you or Forrest could respond, or perhaps it's better responded to by the mayor. But community members are obviously paying very close attention to the budget this year, more so than in past years. And some of the questions that I've received are about the role of the finance department in crafting the budget. So some community members have approached me about, the role of the finance department, I guess, in determining allocation of, funds actually within the budget. And so I don't want to misspeak. And so I thought it might be good to have an opportunity to, for one of you to perhaps respond to that as far as finance's role.
Yeah, I can, I guess, start with that. Forrest can chime in at the end, but really it's a group effort. We work with all of the departments to show them where they're at, what they would like to do into the future, where they're currently at. A lot of the budget is a base budget where you have all the personnel and all the costs that come with that. And so we can bring forward what the base budget looks like. And that's just, if there's step increases or what all of your salaries and wages are going to be, what your general supplies have been, what all of your standard kind of that base budget. And then there's discussion about what could be reduced, what do you want to do in the future. They present all of those to us and the mayor, and there's just more overall discussion on what makes sense going forward. And so we're there to provide details and reporting, and also help weigh out options of there's only so much money to go around. This is what's going on in other departments. This is what's available potentially this year. This is what our forecast is looking like, and really just try to be transparent with all the departments and work together to put together this document. Forrest, did you want to add to that?
No, not really. Only to say that the finance department really, as the main role, is just to shepherd the process through. We do the revenue forecasting. We sort of run the process, but for the most part, as I said, it's a collaborative effort. And at the end of the day, the policymakers make the final decisions.
That's helpful. Thank you very much for your time.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Hamel, did you have another question?
Councilmember Knudsen asked my question, so I'm good. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilmember Anderson.
So mine's more just a comment. I really, as a new council member, really appreciate the time and effort Andrew and Forrest have put into the budget, but also I just wanted to thank you for all the times when I've had questions. You have definitely put the time in to help educate me on city budgets. So just wanted to say that I'm really happy that one of your projects coming forward would be the external facing dashboard. I think, as Councilmember Stone had mentioned, I think the public is becoming much more aware of the value and the situation of city budgets, and a little more focus on how we're spending our money. And I also appreciate the ability to get the timely reports. I've noticed just from the beginning of the year till current, some of those reports are coming out a little faster and a little more timely to assist us to make decisions, especially as we're going forward and maybe having to make alterations to our budgets. So again, I think you guys are doing a fabulous job, and I really appreciate the service and professionalism and time and effort you put into bringing this forward, but also helping support us as council members with the information we need. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We really do want to be a resource for all of you whenever you have questions. So really appreciate that, and feel free to reach out to Forrest or myself whenever you have questions.
Any other additional questions for finance? Okay, thank you so much. And that was a really good overview. Thank you, Forrest, as well, giving us a breakdown of internal charges. I appreciate that information. And I know getting that software up and going this year was a big challenge, but looks like it was good timing because we had a lot of additional things to do. So thank you so much for all your support through this. Okay, so that concludes finance. We are now going to turn to human resources. And human resources is going to be led by our Deputy Administrator, Brian Heinrich. Brian? Oh, and this is on page, human resources is on page 75 in your budget booklet.
Good morning. Thank you, Pinky. Brian Heinrich, Mayor's Office and Human Resources. Going by our format here, let me see if I can, that's a little bit in the way there. Walk through our 2019-2020 department achievements. As has been mentioned, it's sort of a nod to maybe the overall theme of what we've done over the course of this year as a city, as we've supported our employees in the community throughout the pandemic. One of the ways that Human Resources helped out was on the staffing at Whatcom Unified. That was an early effort. We had a number of employees who served out there, participated in things like standing up food security or mobile testing. Those are just a couple examples. Moving on, we have achieved successful labor negotiations with all of our groups currently. And then I did want to point out, it might seem kind of funny to maybe make a nod to this because I think it's something that folks come to rely on, and that is that we have successfully met our payroll twice a month without interruption. We did that through, it's actually I've used the term, it's a perpetual motion machine. As soon as one payroll cycle is over, a new one begins. And this is a group that we identified early on that was essential to city operations, as you might imagine. They came to work at the third floor of the federal building without fail, stayed healthy, stayed separated. So it's just a tremendous effort. That's one thing that our city employees did not have to worry about again through this pandemic. I mentioned this at an earlier presentation, I want to say in September, but we did implement this year the IDEA team. That's the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility team. One of the things that they stood up was, and I hope you all had a chance to participate, it was the How Was Your Day training. If you have not received that or have not done that, please reach out to me. That's just one way to promote, again, those best practices around inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. Moving on, from the beginning of 2019, year to date, we have completed 165 recruitments and processed more than 6,200 applications. We do have 2 more months to go, so I expect that to rise a little bit. One of those recruitments will likely be the legislative assistant position for council. Had some good conversation, good discussion with some council members on that. That's a tremendous effort. Again, 6,200 applications for 165 recruitments. It's a lot of interest in working for the city. I think it speaks favorably to how we are perceived as an organization. Throughout the biennium, we also revised the city's pay placement policy and procedure to promote equitable wage placement. Maybe at its most simplest level, that is not asking applicants what their previous or current wage is when they apply for city positions. That is a nod that we're looking for skills and experience for folks that work at the city. Another big lift by our benefits team was the implementation of the Washington Paid Family and Medical Leave Program. This was a creation of the legislature. It's an additional leave program. Very complicated to implement, but they have done so, and that is an additional sick leave that's available to all employees in addition to what we currently offer. And then I did want to make a nod to another large project that it really reflects, I think, in many ways, how our commitment to the climate action plan looks differently amongst departments, and that is the completion of the transition personnel and payroll files to our on-base program. So all of our files now are accessed digitally. That's a paper reduction. And so again, it's a nod to how that climate action plan becomes part of, if you will, our DNA and how we approach things and how we want to work as a city. In the proposed budget, it's similar to what Andy had said a moment ago, no real substantial changes. And that's maybe a nod to how the mayor started, is that we did prioritize our internal services to support our employees in the community. And then as Forrest mentioned, you'll see some pretty large numbers there for the biennium. That almost $35 million line item there is our benefits program. Just a nod to that. And then looking forward in terms of budget changes, you just saw that we did expire term limited positions, and then the overall furloughs that will affect the HR department moving forward as well. So as we look forward to the next biennium, negotiate contracts as required. We'll have a number of groups that have contracts through 21. Those will have to be negotiated next year. We look forward to that. Provide employee support for the FMLA medical leave. This has been a significant one in the pandemic. We want to make sure we support our employees as they need leave, whether it's dependent or their own care. Again, a nod to the Washington Paid Family and Medical Leave Program. Want to continue to administer that and the Families First Coronavirus Response Act as needed. One of the things that happened over the last 7 months or so is a number of different changes around federal leave, medical leave, things of that nature. It really took great effort amongst our staff to articulate those and convey what that means for our employees as they need those programs. And then, as I mentioned, the IDEA team that create, support, and implement citywide employee trainings continue to do that. One of the things that the IDEA team is doing is supporting some cohort-led groups that will be city employee-led around, again, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility. And I would be happy to take any questions.
Council members? Any questions for the Human Resources Department? Oh, Brian, you may have got off lucky.
Thank you. If anything does come up, don't hesitate to give me a call or shoot me an email. Happy to help.
Thank you so much, and thanks for taking care of our employees. So we can't run without our employees. So thank you very much for that department's consistency. Okay, so no questions for Human Resources. So we are going to move on to legal. And the legal presentation is going to be done by our City Attorney, Peter Raffato. And legal is on page 84 of our budget. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Peter.
Good morning. Can you see my screen, the
Yes.
PowerPoint?
Yes, sir, we can.
Right next to your graying beard, we can see it.
So, well, good morning, council members, Mayor Fleetwood, department head and staff. I'm happy to present this morning. And what I wanted to do initially was, I don't think I've ever stated in a city council meeting what the legal department mission statement is. And we adopted that back in 2015. And it is advancing the city's interests by providing exceptional legal services and creative solutions in civil and criminal matters. I always like to add, because we're the legal department, not too creative, but with that, I do want to get into the achievements for the biennium. And, I tried to organize this in a way that might kind of capture some categories. Starting with advising, really it's a citywide effort providing legal advice to departments and elected officials. And I'll just run through some examples. It's always quite amazing to me the variety of issues that arise that we advise on. issues over the biennium included the Model Toxics Control Act issues, projects such as R.G. Haley and Cornwall Avenue cleanup sites, land use, law and regulations, police practices and procedures, employment and labor matters, and technical ordinances. I say technical ordinances because, for example, we were involved extensively in the wastewater pretreatment ordinance. And then general risk management really falls within that category, in my opinion. The second bullet point, transactional, I included some subcategories there, property, partnerships, and procurement, just because I wanted to include an alliteration somewhere in this presentation. But really what I'm talking about there, and again, this is always in collaboration and really in support of other departments, things like the Samish Commons, that involved tax credit entity issues and some agreements around that. Park property acquisition and development, examples include Cordata Park and the Clark Bakerview property purchase. Watershed property acquisition is always an ongoing effort that the legal department is involved in. Interlocal agreements, those are things that our city relies on heavily, and it's kind of a specialized form of agreement. And for example, our fire department, through its emergency medical services program, relies heavily on interlocal agreements with the county and other jurisdictions. Actually, the CARES Act process we went through with the county, as you recall, involved an interlocal agreement as well. Another example in this category is procurement mechanisms, and that's a term that I'm using to talk about how the legal department gets involved in all the different ways. You know, procurement in the government setting is regulated, and at least in certain areas, and either by policy or by state law. And legal department was involved in that item you've been seeing lately in front of council, the indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracting model that we've been relying on. Moving on to prosecution, you see some numbers there, and those are 2019 numbers. Over 2,500 criminal cases, over 12,000 criminal hearings, over 2,000 victim advocate contacts. And then you see the reference to alternative approaches, sort of the qualitative work that's been going on. The county has been the primary sponsor of the LEAD program, the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion. However, we have myself and our lead prosecutor involved both at the policy level and the operational level in that program. And that's an ongoing thing. We've been looking at those, we've been exploring and implementing versions of alternative approaches to criminal justice over the biennium and before that, and we will continue to do so. With respect to litigation and insurance, I do want to highlight one trend that I'm seeing, especially as to insurance. Going back a few years, I looked at, we have really increasing insurance costs. The legal department is the one that, with its broker, identifies the right level and the right type of, and in consultation with the mayor's office, the right level and type of liability insurance as well as property insurance. And we're seeing those numbers increase substantially. I think over the course of 4 years, the increase has been 30 to 40%. We have various types of lawsuits, personnel hearings, and just to kind of talk about litigation, you know, we get involved in lots of different kinds of hearings, tort defense, personnel, land use, but we also get involved in defending the city in multitude of forums, Superior Court cases, state appeals court cases, federal district court, Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, hearings examiner cases, and arbitrations. And I think there's at least one example of that in each of those over the last biennium. We are responsible, at least our response to public records, and moving on to the next bullet point, open government. We have somewhat of a decentralized process, but we do have in our office the public records officer function. And that function is really divided up in between a couple different individuals. You see there was a substantial increase. That's a 2019 number, I believe, over 3,000 public records requests. And I believe that's 1,000 more than in 2018. So there's an uptick in responding to those public records requests. And lastly, COVID. I put COVID last because I want to stress normalcy. And legal department staff have told me repeatedly, you know, we're not just doing COVID here, we're still doing all the above. And but there was a flurry of activity. As you recall, when this thing broke in March and April, there was a flurry of emergency orders. We were in front of council on emergency powers. The legal department staff was instrumental in the isolation facility on Byron Street, as well as the base camp facility, the shelter. Grant funding, the business grants that went out, legal department supported that. And then I have a note to modified court procedures. The prosecutor's office really did a lot of work in adapting to the different telephonic hearings. Calendars were increased, and there was a lot of work with respect to that. In addition to those different court procedures, the prosecutor's office also basically implemented a system where it deferred and didn't file less serious charges for a period of time during those first 4 months because we didn't want a backlog. We wanted those cases to proceed in an orderly fashion. The more serious cases, DUIs, domestic violence cases, were filed and processed, but some of the other cases were held back, but those have now been filed and are progressing. The other thing I should have mentioned, it's not so much COVID related, but on the prosecution side, they've been identifying hundreds of cases that have been in warrant status for a period of time and really clearing those out. Typically, they're not serious cases, and it's a way of really dealing with cases that they're not serious, they're not really appropriate anymore over they're maybe 10, 15 years old, more likely 15 years old, and it's a way to really clear those up. So that was an undertaking as well. The thing I'd like to stress in this on this slide, it's not written here, but just how proud I am of the legal department staff. I think they lived up to the mission statement, providing excellent service, and there was a lot of creativity involved, especially in those early days as we were trying to figure out both on the prosecution side how to deal with COVID, as well as the emergency orders and the different authorities it would take to address that evolving situation. And I'd like to broaden my pride. You know, it goes to internal services, it goes to the city as a whole, from elected officials on down through department heads and staff. It's, you know, agility and adaptation has really been impressive. So I did want to mention that. So moving on to the 2021-2022 budget, we have 12.9 FTE, and that, as proposed, will continue. We do not have any positions frozen. In fact, we have a vacant prosecutor position. One of the 3 prosecutors that we have is leaving for to go to another part of the country, and we are in the process of advertising for that position. It's a key position. With respect to 2021-22 budget changes, the main reduction was we have had in our budget year to year, because we don't know, an amount budgeted for outside counsel related specifically to environmental remediation. And we have kept those expenses low. So to align the budget with actual expenses, there was a reduction in that. Keep in mind that that is an earmarked fund, so those funds don't go away, they stay in the fund, and they would be available if we ran into a situation where we needed to access those funds through a budget amendment. And as others have noted, furloughs will require workflow adjustments in the legal department. The 2021-2022 work plan, you know, what I'd like to do is kind of go at the very end sometimes and just everyone else's budget and just say all of the above. You know, the legal department is going to support the citywide work plan and a lot of the same issues and tasks, transactional work, advising work, claims and litigation. I think there will be some additional focus on the MOTCA sites, the cleanup sites. I'd like to highlight water rights. I think that will be a big part of the work plan going forward. Open government is always something we advise on and handle those public records requests. And then again, ongoing, we will continue to implement and explore criminal justice alternatives. And that's all I have. Thank you for taking the time to listen to all that.
Thank you so much, Peter. The legal department does so much for us in the background that often we don't realize all the things that are happening. So thank you so much for that information. Council members, any questions for the legal department? Councilmember Knutson and then Lillquist.
Peter, why the public disclosure requests have just keeps rising and rising is rising? Is that just more people getting involved? I don't really understand that one.
Well, I haven't taken the time to get together with James Erb and try to figure out exactly if there's any trends that we can see. The one thing I didn't mention, and this could be part of it, part of the biennium work plan, we did implement a new portal for public records requests. I believe, I mean, there was somewhat outward facing, somewhat a way to manage and track the time spent. That was actually, should have been listed under the accomplishments. Maybe the portal had something to do with it, but I'm speculating at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Lillquist, then Hamel.
Yeah, Peter, you went by it kind of quick at the end about supporting criminal justice reforms. What in particular might the legal department be looking at in the coming year or so?
Well, a lot of it is continuing. You know, LEAD is fairly new here in the county. And so it'll be continuing to implement and explore how that works. We had a prosecutor go down with the county group to see how they're doing. I think it was Burien, I believe, is where they went. You know, each jurisdiction does it a little bit differently. We've had meetings with folks from down south and how they do it. So part of it will be LEAD and GRACE. GRACE will factor into that. Our prosecutors are aware if someone is in that program. You know, it's not so much that it's a free pass, but there's ways that we can try to make those people succeed in their programs if they end up subject to the criminal justice system in some way. We are looking at, you know, we've been asked, I think many of you expressed concern about driving while license suspended third. We have had programs in place, at least approaches to prosecution that really give people multiple opportunities in that area, but we will continue to look at that. I don't think we have anything probably fleshed out enough to really talk about it in detail, but we are definitely working on that.
Is any discussion of bail in there? I know we're doing electronic home monitoring, which kind of often serves the same purpose as bail. But is there any discussion of I mean, most of that is controlled, of course, by the Superior Court across the way. What about internally in Bellingham?
We can take a look at that. We haven't had any specific discussions on that. But as you know, it's interesting. Criminal justice is a complex system that involves different separately electeds, people with different roles. But one thing that I'm very impressed with, and I want to hand it to Darlene Peterson. She gets us together, and even though we all have our separate roles and separate authorities and different obligations and duties, we do get together and talk about things like that. Things like how are we going to approach these, and that includes the police as well, because they're part of the system as well. And we also do the same across the street here with the county. So I know I'm giving kind of a more general answer to your question, but I'm sure we'll be talking about that as well.
Councilmember Hamel?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation here this morning. I think Michael Lilliquist asked most of my question. I'm the lead, which is great. Gene answered or asked before, so I guess it's Michael's turn now. But I am the lead policymaker for the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion team. I work with prosecutor and law enforcement on that. It's a kind of a deceiving name. I just wanted to just tell council real quick here that that program will add 5 intensive case managers to the mix of what we have already for the community. So that's up to 125 people that program can serve. So very important into the mix. And I'm glad to hear, Mr. Rafato, that your prosecuting team is working on those continuances, which are really important, on the DWLS third piece as well. All those things, they matter, and they do add up. So thanks for the work on that. That's it.
Any additional questions for legal? Anyone? Okay, thank you so much, Peter. Again, we really appreciate all the things that your department does for us and has helped us through this COVID, which we're still in. And, and we know there's more things coming. So thank you so much for that. Okay, so our next presentation is going to be on information technology services. And this presentation will be led by our IT director, Marty Mulholland. All you, Marty.
Good morning. Can you see the PowerPoint before you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay, well, good morning, council and mayor and staff. The IT department, as you know, is a service and support organization for all city departments, and we provide technical systems leadership and services based on citywide priorities. For the next few slides, I'll share some of our accomplishments from the previous biennium, and I'm going to take a little extra time to share some facts and figures about our COVID work, as that really had not been presented to you as a council, and it had such an extraordinary impact on not only our entire work program, but the city operations as a whole. So starting things off with BTV. BTV has a new staff. We hired a station coordinator in 2019 and a station assistant in 2020. And they implemented a new playback and scheduling system, which gave BTV a new look for the viewers. But of value to us internally was a new scheduling system that's far less cumbersome than the old system. And something that really excites me with the new staff is that they are really connecting with the community and departments, and we're seeing new programs. And I've got images of 4 shown here. This month, in collaboration with the Whatcom Dispute Resolution Center, we're seeing programming with daily conflict resolution tips playing on the air. The upper right image shows Mayor Fleetwood filming a COVID video that was shared with the community. The lower right image shows the Squalicum Creek Tour Restoration Progress Update Report. And lower left was something unique and kind of fun for us, which was collaboration with the Downtown Sounds concerts, and they were incredibly popular. It was a virtual Downtown Sounds event. And the very first video from that had 2,500 views from the community, which was pretty significant. This past year, when we talk about achievements, we really hit some major milestones on a number of projects. And this is really exciting because so many of the efforts that I'll describe briefly here took years to reach. And you've heard a bit about Finance Enterprise already. I have this very exciting screenshot to show it to you. Andy described the fact that we went live in March and June. 200 employees had to be trained to use this new system, and all that training had to be done virtually because we were in COVID by the June timeframe. And Andy and Brian both talked about electronic document management, and this system has electronic document support and approvals. And that's what this screenshot is showing you. In this case, I have a long distance bill. It's being routed to me electronically. I can click on the paperclip to see the invoice and make sure everything is correct. And then I can click on the green approve button and it'll move forward into the system. So we have staff working in 34 different locations, and we used to route all this paperwork manually. And in the time of COVID, we didn't want to route paperwork manually, but more importantly, for years, we've wanted to improve the efficiency of this sort of effort. And that's what we're demonstrating here, and we're very excited about. I think many of you in the council know that we installed our very first hearing loop in the city, in the council chambers in March of this year. This was a multi-year planning effort in collaboration with Public Works facilities staff and our ADA coordinator, Kim Brown. And that system went live. It was tested in collaboration with local members of the Whatcom County Hearing Loss Association of America. They validated that the system worked. And a hearing loop provides improved hearing support for those with hearing loss. So if you have a hearing aid that has a telecoil, it will work with that and provide enhanced hearing capabilities. It also works for those with cochlear implants. That system was finalized weeks before COVID hit in March. And so it's a bit of a bummer that we didn't get to celebrate it in person. I greatly look forward to the day that we can share that experience with those with hearing loss, and they can really participate more fully and actively in a room in the council chambers. So next up, maintenance management system. I expect you'll hear more about this from Eric. This was also a multi-year project that also consolidated systems. The project leadership was done in Public Works, but IT provided quite a bit of back-end technical work, including the deployment of many, many iPads. This new system allows our field workers to use iPads, and this also allowed them to stay in the field and work remotely during COVID. It's GIS based, and so there was a very heavy lift from the standpoint of our Geographic Information Systems team to make sure that the GIS data about our assets that are being maintained it's actually integrated, it's baked into the system so that the field crews have accurate information about the assets while they're in the field maintaining those assets. Our public website went to a new platform. We have a few websites that are on platforms that are reaching end of life, and the public website moved forward this year. Again, we had to provide training for the staff remotely. We couldn't use classrooms because we were in COVID when that went live. We've gotten positive feedback from staff members and the community about the new platform. It was largely, it's very similar to our existing website with some enhancements. The real goal there was to get it to a new platform, but we're happy that it's a bit easier to use for our staff members. Finally, or actually next up, we implemented a security information event management system. This was a capital project request from the biennium. This is a system that gathers data from a number of different systems. It pulls in log files, and it allows us to analyze security events, look for alerts, determine what's going on or what might be going on, and have a tool to analyze that from a broad perspective. It was a priority improvement for us to enhance our cybersecurity capabilities, and that system is online. And finally, we did a big telephone system upgrade. Many of you council members who've been around for quite some time remember we bought a system called ShoreTel. Well, ShoreTel was purchased by another company, Mitel, and we had to literally switch over the entire system. That's every telephone switch, every system, all the software running on servers. It affected every single computer that uses telephone systems, which is significant. And we cut over to that new system, again, providing the staff with training remotely because we were in COVID when that system cut over. So it was a big year in terms of milestones on major projects. From a technology operations standpoint, I'm titling this slide, Successes During a Challenging Time. And council, you may recall a couple of years ago, I told you this was going to be a big year for staff retirements, a big biennial for staff retirements for IT. And you've heard this, I think, from other departments as well. Well, indeed, we did have significant turnover, and due to retirements and for a few other reasons. And we have 3 vacancies on staff right now that we're trying to recruit before the end of the year. So we've been dealing with staff turnover for much of the biennial. And if we replace those 3 vacancies, which I hope we will, 26% of our staff will be new. So that is represents a learning curve, and it also represents new eyes and ideas and perspective. But it's a challenge that we've had in the background that I wanted to share. I want to take a moment to mention security. We've mentioned the new system that went in this last biennium. And that's because there is a reduction in this budget that affects the security program. But I wanted to make sure that the council was aware we do have a cybersecurity program. We have a number of members of the IT staff working as a team. We participated in multiple risk assessments and audits. Generally, those assessments result in recommendations to us. Often those are prioritized. So you need to do this, you need to do that. You need to update this procedure. You should take a closer look at X, Y, or Z. In response to those assessments and audits, based on those priorities, we implement improved defense to improve the city's defensive posture against malicious activity. We also maintain a training program for new employees and with an annual reminders, and we do fish training for all staff all year long, since phishing is one of the top risks that could affect any employee in the city, or could be introduced. It's a method to introduce malware into our organization. So we have made that fish training and awareness a very high priority. I think the council's fairly aware of much of our COVID work, remote workforce. I've got some facts and figures about that on the next slide. Remote meetings such as this one, which require a new staff person, sometimes 2, just to make the meeting run successfully. We have this new role called a Zoom moderator. We also supported the departments making countless operating and system changes. So as departments flexed their operations during COVID, that led to requests from us, everything from changing a phone system to reorganizing website materials, etc., and many system configuration changes. We also supported the community. BTV aired COVID videos and information. We helped to purchase that Engage Bellingham platform that I believe the council is familiar with, a method of connecting with the community when we can't have in-person meetings. And IT is also supporting the community by providing some back-end technical and administrative support for the business grants that are going into the community now. It's kind of fun for me to share with all of you some photos of our tech services team. I took these 3 photos right during the height of the remote workforce support, where we had ordered equipment and we were really trying to configure it and get it out to the door so our employees could work successfully remotely. We spent over $380,000 in laptops and licenses and related equipment for our remote workers. And much of this should come back to our SURF fund based on the agreed upon CARES Act allocation for this need. And that will, I hope, allow us to reduce our spending in a future year. We haven't reduced that spending yet, but it is something that I'm hoping we can do in a future year. We converted many of our employees from desktop employees. They used to use a desktop and now they use a laptop. And we converted their workstations on site so that they could ideally seamlessly work from home as needed. And then if they have to come in to the office for a day and do a task or for a few hours, their system at their desk is ready for them to use when they need it. We had to also re-architect the way our employees connect with the network. We had so many working from home that we had to change the capacity in that regard. It's hard to know exactly how many employees were telecommuting at any one time, but one indicator was this use of something called a soft phone license. We issued 248 of those. And what that allowed our employees to do is go home with typically a laptop computer and answer public phone calls, transfer public calls, make conference calls. It's a seamless process. Those licenses we did not have to pay for. They were available, and we had 248 employees that took advantage of those soft phone licenses. We provided extensive support for the public meetings. The Zoom moderation task, I believe we've got hundreds and hundreds of hours in that, and it did take away from other work, and it continues to do so. We have trained many other departments to tackle that for their public meetings. We also provided the video conference software and training to many staff members who are all doing meetings remotely. And finally, during the same era, we deployed a number of new smart devices, and this was largely in support of the new maintenance management system that's being used by Public Works and Parks. But in this biennium, we deployed 208 additional iPhones and iPads, mostly to Public Works. So it was a big, big year. And finally, I wanted to share, again, kind of an internal perspective of workload. We have a system called our service desk system, and when employees request technical help, they send an email or call a phone number. And you can see from this chart, our projected increase this year is for 5,500 additional service desk tickets from departments. This began to increase in March, and it continues today. And it's not only driven by the remote workforce, but by all the major changes that we've made to systems that we hope to refine and streamline and provide increased training, et cetera, in the year ahead. But I just want to let the council see this and let you know that in response to this level of demand, some of our tickets have lingered. We've had to prioritize constantly to meet the department's top needs. And so we haven't been able to provide as quick resolution on some of these as we would like. It's just been a necessary impact of this year. Further challenge with staff turnover, but we've tried really hard to prioritize and reprioritize and communicate with the departments about their needs. So moving into the budget, as you've seen from Forrest's presentation earlier, IT has a lot of different internal services expenses. And I'm going to start with the right-hand side, and then we'll run through the changes. IT in 2020 has 28.6 FTEs. In 2021 and 2022, you'll see a reduction there. The reduction is of 1.2 FTEs. And what we did, the council may recall at the mid-biennial, 2 positions were added to provide dedicated staffing for cybersecurity. We didn't fill those positions. And so this budget does reduce this and delays it, but we will still stay committed to working on security as a team. The information security officer position has been eliminated in this budget. The security analyst position has been deferred for 1 year, so there is funding for it in 2022. We also, in response to cable franchise fee revenue that's declining, and I'll spend a little more time on this on another slide, we reduced our BTV station assistant position. It had been a full-time position, but because of this decline in franchise fee revenue, we reduced it to be a 0.8, which is 4 days a week rather than full-time. So on the left-hand side of the slide, under the revenues, the first revenue is one I want to call your attention to and also let you know that it's been corrected. The revenue projection did not make it into the preliminary budget, but will be corrected in the final budget. And this, under this license and permits category, that's where you see the franchise fee revenue coming from cable TV subscribers. And what's occurring, and this is occurring nationally, is people are leaving their cable TV subscriptions and they're going to online services such as Netflix, et cetera, to watch their video programs. And what that's leading to is a reduction in cable franchise fee revenue. In the IT budget, we get a portion of the revenue. The rest goes to the general fund. So what you'll see here is $600,000 in revenue was in the budget for 2019-2020. And you'll see we've reduced our forecast in 21 and 22 to $545,000 in revenue. The next revenue line there, charges for goods and services. This line does fluctuate year to year, but it's fluctuating more so because of the many allocations that changed this year for a number of services, everything from telecommunications to computer replacements. It also reflects an increased technology footprint, particularly for utilities, more laptops instead of desktops, more iPads, more software licensing, et cetera. That is going to drive the costs up. I think the reallocation was the bigger driver in this case. Miscellaneous revenue, that is also a Comcast related revenue. I may propose reducing these a little bit more based on our trends right now, but this is our PEG equipment revenue that we can only use to purchase equipment related to the channel and channel operations. And I'll cover that again a little bit more, what is proposed on a subsequent slide. And then our other financing for sources revenue on the revenue side, that is revenue coming into pay for our GIS team. We have 3 staff members, and Public Works pays for most of their salaries and support, and that revenue comes in to pay for those 3 staff members. On the salary and wage and on the expense side, salary, wage, personnel benefits, you'll see an increase in the second year when that information security analyst position is unfrozen. Supplies continues to move up. That's that increasing footprint of computers and software. And so it's not really IT, it's the city's use of software. And when we have new systems that we're paying for, typically IT picks up the maintenance costs after the project is completed. And so you're seeing a little bit of that in our budget. And again, I have more on that on another slide. I do want to mention other goods and other services. That's where we pay our maintenance expenses, our telephone costs. We have money in there for consulting for the franchise renewal, since Comcast's franchise renewal is up. And you'll see a little bit of a reduction there in other services and charges. That's where we tried to spend down the fund balance for telephone costs. So we tried to give the departments a bit of a cost break in support of the funding challenges this year. On the capital side, it may look like a fairly flat budget. 2019 was 3.5, nearly 3.5 million. You'll see 2.8 in 21-22. I want to point out that much of that 2.8 is really a reallocation of these longer term projects. There's not very much that's new in this capital budget, and I'll walk through that on a subsequent slide. So budget changed. The entire IT department will be experiencing furloughs, and there will be a service level reduction as a result. I've already addressed that the general fund reduced and deferred some of that dedicated cybersecurity staffing that had been added in the mid-biennium. A little bit more about changes related to the Public Education and Government TV Fund. So this is the fund where the cable TV franchise fees come in to fund BTV programs, and then there's another percentage, a larger percentage that goes to the general fund. This is the franchise fee revenue that has been declining. The declines have represented about 4% a year since 2017. I think we saw a little bit of decline in 16. We anticipate that this revenue will not be restored. And I think the council may recall that the FCC is also looking at changes that may further reduce this revenue. That is still being battled out in the courts, so we don't have an exact impact or assessment on that. And so therefore, due to this declining revenue, we made 2 significant changes. We reduced the BTV station assistant position. We also eliminated the Access Bellingham training program, which costs $40,000 a year. We will continue to accept public access programming submittals, but this budget reduces that training program in response to the declining revenue. I think Forrest spoke to some of the funds reallocation, as have I, but we shifted some of our department expenses. Many of the maintenance bills used to be shown in the IT budget in the general fund. We moved them, they weren't really department expenses, they were really citywide expenses. And so those have been shifted to the computer infrastructure replacement fund. So if you look into the nitty gritty, more detailed pages in the budget document, it may look like IT had a huge budget reduction, but mostly it's shifting those expenses from the general fund to the SURF fund. We've also mentioned the telecommunications reduction that we took on this year to try to hold down expenses citywide. So I am going to spend more time on the capital budget simply because it informs our work program. And if the council, I believe last time you discussed a dedicated meeting for capital, I'm happy to participate there as well. But as I mentioned earlier, most of this is multi-year continuing work. I'll highlight the new initiatives and address the others briefly. So the city is building a new building, a new operations center out on Pacific Street for Public Works and Parks. And we recognized as that building was being planned that we had an opportunity to meet a long-standing need that we've had internally, I think as long as I've been here, and that is for some larger meeting room and training room space. This facility has a first floor flexible conference room. It can be divided in two. And once we recognized that, we collaborated with Public Works to plan for a BTV studio type setup in that space. And that'll allow us to have trainings and public meetings that can be filmed and aired live on BTV. So that $75,000 is coming from the PEG equipment fund. It can only be used for purposes of this nature. It'll have a podium and screens and cameras. And I also want to mention, although it's not in the IT budget, it's in the building budget, that Public Works does plan to put a second hearing loop in that space. So when we use this, we'll have that hearing system support for those that go into that building. We have another new initiative that is a unique opportunity now, I think. We're proposing to do a limited scope business continuity plan with some infrastructure spending. I'm hoping that this allocation of $140,000 is on the high side because it'll be a blend of professional services and infrastructure. So the city has really not had the best business continuity plan, I'll say. Really, if we have a disaster and a disaster that affected some of our platforms, such as an earthquake, excuse me, or a cybersecurity event, and our systems went down, a business continuity and recovery plan would allow us to say, do we have a good plan for this? Do we know how to recover these systems in this sort of event? Can we do it quickly? How long will it take? And this has been challenging for organizations everywhere, but with the advent of the cloud and some more enhanced storage options, we believe we have an opportunity to tackle this conversation and have a better plan for recovering our technology. The goals would include improving the city's ability to protect its systems and data, to recover our operations in the event of a disaster, and to have an increased understanding of our business recovery priorities. I also want to mention that given the workload and so on, this project is one that can't be initiated until we're really ready to go because it's a citywide effort to have that conversation about recovery of technology operations. Chief Hewitt has indicated he will provide a project sponsor from the fire department to work with us on this effort. The budget, we've often had kind of a catch-all category called high priority and contingency funds. Often we don't use the contingency funds. This past year we did. I'm always glad to have that appropriation in case some need comes up urgently. This year, we used the contingency funds to meet a storage gap in our backup system. We ran out of storage space and we had to have more. And we also purchased the Engage Bellingham platform using those contingency funds. So those are examples of how it's been used. In this budget, we have $60,000 in cybersecurity assessments, $10,000 in database infrastructure, $40,000, and that's 2 years for the community engagement software platform. And we have a fairly robust contingency set aside of $200,000. Again, hope not to need it, but it's very helpful to have it there when we do. Many of you on the council are familiar with this life cycle replacement concern. I want to echo what Forrest said in that we need to maintain our software and systems to avoid security risks. In the old days, we could have an old system running and we'd say, hey, it still works. It's kind of clunky, it's kind of old, but we can make it work. In these last 5 years, with cybersecurity becoming more of a priority, we've emphasized our life cycle work even more. And our network infrastructure is at the core of the city's operation and generally a high or top priority for me when we look at capital budget submittals. So this includes replacements of servers, switches, firewalls, and in 2022, one of our 2 core routers. These are basically the traffic managers of our network. And those are $150,000 each. We try to balance this out so that the funding is relatively smooth year over year. So as I mentioned, the vast majority of the capital budget is continuing efforts and funding. So we've talked about document management. We hope to make more inroads there every year. We've been working on this for multiple years with the courts and with HR and now with our financial documents. The finance system project had a payment schedule and we haven't fully paid the vendor for that system. So 1.3 million being carried forward. Much of that will go to the vendor based on the payment terms of the contract. And permitting, we've had a very challenging experience with our permitting system vendor. We are very much looking forward to upgrading that system, provide some better services for our department and the public. It's been delayed several different times. I'm very much hoping we can put that in, but we've had funding set aside for many years for final payments for the permit system that went in three plus years ago. So we're continuing that. And then the web platforms I mentioned, we did the public website this year. We're going to do our internal staff central site and related tools next year. So everything in that multi-year continuing budget is a continuation from the previous biennial funding based on balances, project balance estimates. And I believe this is my last slide. BTV, I've mentioned that the Comcast franchise is up for renewal. We'll be talking about that with our franchise work group on the council, which is Dan Hamill and Hannah Stone. We're always striving to enhance BTV content and programming wherever possible. I think I've mentioned the platform changes. We're also seeing some changes in our Microsoft tools. Some of our collaboration tools will be changing. And I think I've mentioned many of these upgrades and business improvement goals. We've invested in some major platforms and we need to keep them up to date. And we'll continue to strive for business and efficiency improvements for the city in collaboration with those departments. And then finally, we always strive to provide the best possible ongoing customer services and support. So thank you. I will stop my share here. That was the mouthful, but I'm available to answer your questions.
Thank you, Marty. Your department took on a lot this year and allowed us to continue all of our services. We're very, very grateful for all your Zoom operators. And I know that the software for access for people who are hearing impaired was a very big lift for us as well in our community. So thank you for all that. I'm going to start with Councilmember Lillquist.
Well, excuse me. First, I want to agree with what Pinky just said, Marty. That was an impressive range of critical functions that your department handles. And one of my concerns had to do with the security of our data and our storage, given that most of the city is now basically online. You mentioned, however, that was looking at the business continuity and recovery aspect would be delayed to really go through with that and redo that at a new level. So my question is, how are we right now? What is our feeling of certainty with regard to cloud storage, backup storage, recovery, firewalling? So if there is a problem, we can recover. Where are we now that will have to continue to be for a year or two until the replacement is conceived and implemented?
All right. Thank you for that question. First, I do hope we can take on that project. If we get up to full staffing and the departments are really ready, then I truly hope to do that. I just didn't want to set expectations for this council, given the year that we've had. But to answer your question, our goal for many years has been to ensure that the city's data is protected. And so we send our data to an offsite location in another part of the state. It's in Spokane. We have had some challenges with that. I mentioned the contingency purchase of additional storage. We're actually putting that into play right now and anticipate a trip to Spokane to meet that baseline service of getting the city's data to another location in the state once per day. But also the city is using a number of cloud platforms where the data isn't here. And we've been working contractually with those vendors to ensure that that data is protected. But we still have to look at our connections to those systems. So our baseline was to ensure protection of the city data. And what we're hoping to do with this business continuity effort is to do a better job of prioritizing and increasing our capability to recover quickly. That may take some infrastructure. We may use the cloud to store some of the data differently. I don't know how it will come out because we haven't taken it on, but I think we have an opportunity to improve in that way. And I think we should. The city is very complicated with extraordinary public safety and operational needs. And again, we're not unique in this area. I know of 2 other agencies that we can learn from some of their lessons in this regard as well. So we want to move from protection of data to recovery of operations in the event of an incident.
Councilmember Huffman, Anderson, then Stone.
Thank you. So I've been really lucky to have a lot of interaction with the BTV staff this year, and they're great. They're amazing. So kudos to them for doing a really great job. But I've heard some of the ideas for additional programming for BTV, which sounds really exciting. Some arts programming, educational, informational. I think it's a really great platform for allowing people to maybe see some things around our community that they hadn't seen before or experienced. So I think there's a lot of potential there, and that's exciting. But then, of course, the funding reduction or the revenue reduction from cable is disappointing to see. I guess, have there been any thoughts about alternatives to that revenue source, considering the fact that it's probably going to continue to decline because people are experiencing their media in a different way?
This is a challenging policy discussion that's occurring with agencies everywhere. I provided a little bit more revenue reduction detail to our franchise work group because I don't see it returning. And given the revenue declines to the general fund and our interest in preserving that, that's why we took those steps this year. And I am excited that the new BTV team is connecting with the community. I want to provide a shout out to Janice Keller because we do have a policy. We focus on government operations and meetings, and then community need and interest, but she assists us in building those connections and helping to get that community programming going. But Councilmember Huffman, I don't have a great answer for you. Other agencies are making reductions to their BTV programs, or their cable TV funded programs, and striving to do cost cutting and efficiency value. We may see a new FCC in the years ahead, and that may change the rules of the road. But right now, some pretty significant reductions are being considered in the courts.
Councilmember Anderson, then Stone.
Thank you. We've received several emails from community members with their concern about the elimination of funding for the training on the access program. And of course, budget cuts are never easy and they're tough decisions to make. But I'm just curious, and if you don't have the number, if maybe somebody could just send us an email on it. But I'm curious how many people took advantage of that program over the last year. There's a difference between 18 and 800 when we're looking at funding services for the community. So I'm a little curious before we eventually determine where these cuts happen, whether or not this is a good place.
Yes, I don't have those figures in front of me. I'll provide it to you. It is a well-run program. It's difficult at this time to make recommendations to you as policymakers. I think I've also struggled with, the workload already and going into the general fund to support city operations and security. So it's a challenging year, and I will get you some figures on that.
Councilmember Stone.
Thank you, Councilmember Vargas. So Marty, just to follow up full circle on that, and then I have one other question, is with respect to Access Bellingham, I know that you mentioned that we would still be able to accept public access programming submittals. And I guess one of my questions is, would the public still have access to use of the space and the station? Because I know that that's some of the limitation, right, for community members, is actually having the equipment that's necessary to produce those submissions. So that's the first question.
Right. The way we envisioned it in this proposed budget was that the equipment sharing program would be eliminated because it's our Access Bellingham training contractor that oversees the equipment to those community members. So this would come down to those who are already trained and perhaps have access to equipment submitting programming.
Okay, good information to have. And then the final question was related, there was an FTE that was being eliminated, and I didn't write down the full title of that position, but I feel like there was security in the title. And I know with increased or heightened interest and concern regarding security versus diminishing concern, I was just curious the decision to eliminate that particular FTE.
All of these decisions were very difficult. We've been filling positions the entire biennium because of our turnover. Because we hadn't yet filled either of the two security positions. So the one you're referring to that's eliminated is called the Information Security Officer. That would have been a higher level position. What we're looking at now is in 2022, bringing on a security analyst who would most likely report to one of our IT division managers. We also, I want to mention, we're not going to stop the security team effort. It takes multiple security skills to respond to these risk assessments and to implement the changes that are needed. So does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you, Marty.
Okay, thanks.
Council members, any additional questions?
Councilmember Vargas?
Yes, Mayor Fleetwood.
I'm sorry if there's some questions asked. I was just going to make the briefest comment as it relates to Access Bellingham. but if anyone else raised their hand, go to them first, please.
You're clear.
Okay. I just wanted to underscore and emphasize what Marty conveyed as it relates to the whole BTV Access Bellingham training aspect. I know that there were some people who contended that Access Bellingham is being cut, and we've underscored that in fact it's not, although a lot of people point out appropriately that the training contract and process is what allowed certainly some important number of community members being able to go in and make productions and be part of Access Bellingham. This was a really difficult one. I remember the day when we were crafting the budget, and that was one of the line items that came up for consideration. And I just don't want anyone to think that this was taken lightly. It was really difficult. I know the contract provider, known him for many, many years. I like him. I've always wanted to be a proponent for the public when I was on the city council years ago, promoting access from the public to have productions on BTV. And this was just really tough. It was prioritizing in a recession. And the question came down to, if we had to make cuts anywhere in the IT realm, what would we want to first prioritize and preserve? And there were just things that rose up higher, even though I recognized the training program is very important. It was just a painful one to propose. So I just wanted to put that out there. Of course, it's in your realm now. Happy deliberating, and we're here to support you from a staff perspective as you engage in doing the hard work of budget making. Back to you, Pinky.
Council members, any additional questions for IT on budget? Anything else? Okay, again, Marty, thank you so much. We are very grateful for all the support that your team is providing and allowing us to all be able to work, even though we're not in the office anymore. So we know that's been a very heavy lift for your department, and we certainly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. So I'm just going to review what we've got upcoming. So we have two more. Oh, wait, Councilmember Stone, you have a question?
Thank you, Councilmember Vargas. Perhaps this should have been brought up during Brian Heinrich's presentation with HR, but I do have a question if either Brian or perhaps the mayor could respond regarding furloughs. I know that we highlighted the fact that, payroll has continued, thank goodness. But obviously each department is highlighting furloughs. And I'm just curious, because this is not my area of expertise, to understand what does that look like exactly for our city staff? Because obviously it impacts a lot of different departments, but how are we proposing that furloughs will be utilized in this biennial budget?
It's a good question. And generally speaking, what we've asked is for some groups to take up to 12 days, two other groups to take up to 16 days. We have exempted public safety from furloughs. So think of our fire, police, dispatch, and municipal court. Within some departments, as you acknowledge their payroll, we have exempted those staff from furloughs as well. But for everyone else, like I said, it's a mixture of up to 12 or up to 16 days.
Continue.
So just a quick follow-up. And so just to clarify, so that's 16 days of basically leave without pay, right? Correct. And then that the scheduling of that is done just by department, because obviously I know the impact, like, Marty and Peter had both referenced, obviously, workloads needing to be juggled. That is determined internally by department.
It is. We're working through the mechanics with a nod towards being ideally as flexible as possible. However, there may be some scenarios that if we could potentially close a front counter, for an afternoon or a day, that might actually be better. But we're working through that. Like I said, it was a nod towards flexibility in recognizing that what we wanted to do was continue to provide the continuity of services to our community without, or at least limiting as much disruption as possible. Of course, that is a challenge, because anytime folks are away, that there will be an impact to the services that we provide. But it's really a nod towards that continuity of service.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Any other additional questions? Okay, so we have 2 more scheduled budget meetings. On November 2nd, we will do Public Works. November 9th will be Mayor and Council. And just as a reminder, Council, you received a form from Brian Heinrich. If you have any budget amendments that you want to do or suggestions, if you could please bring those forms for November 9th, and we'll review them in that meeting. And then, of course, on November 9th, we will introduce our property tax ordinance and revenue forecast and the public hearing on the budget. And then November 23rd, Council will adopt our property tax ordinance and a second public hearing. December 7th, we'll introduce our budget ordinance, and December 14th, adopt our budget ordinance. So that is our schedule for the remainder of our budget work for 2020. If no one has any additional questions, I am going to adjourn this meeting. Everyone okay?
Councilmember Vargas, if I could.
Yes, Mayor.
You indicated putting forth the, submitting the modification request forms by the 9th. I would just urge people who have notions as it relates to that to please forward them as soon as they're able, and if possible in advance of November 9th.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Anything for the good of the order? Okay, till later. Thank you so much for the budget meetings. Bye, everybody.